Welcome to the Glazov gang. Our guest this evening, Anne-Marie Murrell, the National Director of Politichicks.tv, Dwight Schultz, who played Murdoch on NBC's The A-Team, and you can visit his site at DwightSchultzFansite.nl, and Lela Gilbert, the author of Saturday People, Sunday People, Israel Through the Eyes of a Christian Sojourner. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming on to the Glazov gang.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Lela, let us begin with you. I'm honored and privileged to have you on the Glazov gang, and it was such a moving book, really touched the heart in so many places, if that's one way to describe it, but also so many horrors that you're describing in there as well, and the West seems to be asleep and not saying anything. Let's begin with this. What brought you to Israel?
Mostly curiosity. My father was a great fan of Israel and of the Jewish people, and he was a Christian man who believed that God's prophecies were being fulfilled in the regathering of the Jews in their land. And I grew up with that idea, and I'd always wanted to go, and I'd been a lot of places in the world sort of on my own, with people paying me to go or writing, but nobody took me to Israel, and finally I said, if I don't get there, I'm never going to make it. So in 2006, I decided to spend 4 months. I rented an apartment online, and I didn't know anyone in the country, but I packed up and left and ended up in the middle of a war, which was silly, but I had more suitcases than friends when I started out, and I just never left. I've come and gone. For reasons of my visa, I had to, but I also have family in California, but I just haven't wanted to leave. I love the place, and that's what got me there, was curiosity, and it still makes me curious, and I keep staying longer.
Why your title?
Saturday People, Sunday People comes from a jihadi saying, which is, at the worst statement, on Saturday we kill the Jews, on Sunday we kill the Christians. It's usually in graffiti, it says, first comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. But the real heart of it, there's a picture in the book of a flag, a jihadi flag, that actually says in Arabic what I first stated. And the idea is that to cleanse the land of non-Muslims, that the first people to go are the people of the book, and those are the Saturday people, and next come the Sunday people, and what we see now is that that's happening. The Jews have been kicked out of most of the Muslim lands, and now the Christians are being abused as well.
Lela, tell us a little bit about the reception you received from Israelis.
Well, I was treated like gold by everyone, and I spoke no Hebrew. My Hebrew is awful, lo tov, and it's still awful, and I'm ashamed of myself, but everyone helped me, everyone welcomed me. All of the cliches of the prickly sabra that might be sweet on the inside, but you may never find out, were simply not true. These people are so dear, but they're also super smart, well-read, engaged in ideas, people you have to really keep up with. And I love the inspiration of that. I love talking to them and hanging out with them.
Lela, we want to talk about several themes as the discussion proceeds. I want to get to our other guests. Before we do, tell us briefly, what inspired you to write it, and what do you hope this book will help achieve?
I started writing little vignettes about my experience there, and somehow they ended up, thanks to Ruthie Bloom, who you know, she was the Jerusalem Post at the time, they ended up in the paper, and then I started finding other stories, and little by little I had a lot of, 25 or so stories, and I thought it might be interesting to put them together in a book. But then I came across this whole idea, or this, not idea, the reality of the 850,000 refugees that were expelled from Israel between 48 and 1970. And it was an untold story, at least for me and to many others, I find. So I guess what I want people to do is know what really goes on, know the real Israelis. I want them to know the truth about the country, that there are real rockets flying in and jeopardizing lives a lot, even now as we speak, and that this is a good country of good people, people that are lovable and dear and are faithful to what they believe is true, which is what we believe is true.
Lela, thank you so much, and I guess I will say, as somebody that studies the left throughout my whole life, that it is very clear that the left owns and controls the boundaries of our discourse, and because there's anti-Semitism in the left, that anti-Semitic structure now rules our society, And that is why when the Israelis suffer, the West is completely silent and, at worst, on the side of the perpetrators.
Right.
Anne-Marie, what did you get from the book, and what are some of your reflections and comments?
It was so beautiful for me. My grandmother went to Israel twice, and I used to listen to her for hours talk about the people and the places that she'd been. And this book, your vision, reminded me so much of the vision that my grandmother portrayed to all of us, except for the horrors that are happening. And the Israel that my grandmother visited in the 70s and the 80s is just not the same. And people were so happy to love Israel before. And I don't know what's changed in America. It's disgusting to me, and it's so sad that I wish everyone would read this book. It's just beautiful.
I would interrupt briefly in the sense that because of the left's success and its control of our boundaries and discourse, the way that kulaks were seen under Stalin, the Jews are the new kulaks in the sense of the left demonizing the Jews, and this is a tragedy. Dwight?
Well, it's a remarkable book. If you know something about the Middle East, I was talking to Lela earlier, it just brought back so many memories. My first memories really of becoming very politically aware was in 1967, watching Abba Eban at the United Nations. I had to go up on the internet to hear his voice again because I was inspired by, he was the finest orator that I had ever heard. He articulated, and ironically, I saw a short 15-minute segment with him being interviewed here in the United States at around 1953, and the subject they were talking about was, what are you going to do about these 800,000 Arabs who have been pushed out? And his answer was the most perfect answer. I can't go into it because he spoke for 5 minutes and detailed exactly why the decision to leave Israel really was the Arab decision, that Jews have been forced out of everywhere by another culture, but we didn't push them out. They decided to leave on their own, and we are the size of New Jersey, and the rest of the Arab world is the size of the rest of the United States. How is it possible that they cannot absorb the small number of refugees? That it's political, that it was made political, and because of hatred. And another thing that struck me is how women seem to really nail it with the way they write. Whether it's, and you mentioned, I'm lucky because of you, Jamie, to have met Nani Darwish, that you mentioned in the book, and Batyor, Oriana Fallaci, Melanie Phillips, who have all, and now Lela, are detailing what is happening in the world through the Middle East, and that it's happening everywhere. And we're doing nothing about it. Nothing. That's why this is a fundamentally important book for everybody to read, because it is a history of Israel. At the same time, I said to Lela, this book ought to be thrown on David Gregory's desk, and he should be asked, why haven't you reported any of this since 2006? Thank
you so much, Dwight. Lela, I'm going to let you respond to what our other gang members have said, but I want to lead with something. Let's focus in on some of the central issues that I'm so grateful that you touched on, and also with such grace and very, very powerful presentation of these very serious issues. Let's start with the key one, the Temple Mount Plaza. I mean, if there is an example of injustice and hatred and the world's silence, tell us your experience at the Temple Mount Plaza, the way that Jews and Christians cannot even pray, say their prayers out loud, or bring their scriptures, and just a little bit of your experience and why this is so significant.
Well, I was shocked because it's a little bit like what I'm told Saudi Arabia is like. In other words, to fly into Saudi Arabia with a cross or a Star of David on is unacceptable. And carrying scripture, I think you can take one if no one sees it. And the Temple Mount, which is where the two Jewish temples stood, is a place where only Muslims can worship. There's a mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and there's the Dome of the Rock. These are among now, they're said to be the holiest sites in Islam. They weren't always, and for many years they lay in ruin and nobody cared about them. But as it became politically expedient, they became more holy. But the reality is you can't pray, you can't sing. Groups of Christian pilgrims would love to sing and pray on the Temple Mount. They will be kicked out. In fact, last week, somebody refused to sit during the Holocaust, after the Holocaust siren was sounded on Yom HaShoah. A man refused to not stand, and he was escorted away because he defiled the holy Muslim site there. The other thing about it is that the Muslim world is now saying there never was a Jewish temple there in the first place. There was nothing there, and that the temple was someplace else, in Nablus or someplace. This is Arafat's statement at Camp David. And I met with Gabriel Barkay, who's an archaeologist, who's sifting through the remains of what was illegally hauled away from there in dump trucks over the last few years. There are not only Jewish artifacts from the first temple and the second temple and forevermore, but also Christian artifacts from a very large cathedral or a basilica that was there during the time of Justinian, they think. These things are, this is the lie. There was no temple, there's no prayer now for Christians and Jews, and no worship.
Lela, now you call this a cultural intifada. This is the way that there was Gulag denial, the way that there was Holocaust denial. This is temple denial.
That's right.
Now, Dr. Gabriel Barkay, is that the right word?
Barkay, yeah.
Barkay, I apologize. He said something incredible that you quoted in your book, that he said, and he's one of the most respected biblical archaeologists, that temple denial is more dangerous and serious than Holocaust denial. Tell us briefly why.
Because there's still people that remember the Holocaust. We have film, we have photographs, we have witnesses. There are no witnesses except believers that can speak for the temples. That we have archaeology which is saying this is dated from such and such a time. But we don't have people that were there. So that's what he means by that. He means we have no witnesses.
But Lela, in some ways, look, you can deny the Holocaust, horrible thing to do, obviously for a million reasons. But when you engage in temple denial, you are, among other things, also separating the Jewish people from their God.
Oh, absolutely. You're de-Judaizing Israel. That's the intention. The intention is to continue to rewrite history until the Jews are written out of history.
And once you do that, then you can flood Israel with the refugees and destroy it completely.
Exactly right.
Dwight, we're going to let you go, but let's let Anne-Marie and then you go. Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts on all this?
I can't even fathom how they can get away with this and why more people don't know about this. I mean, with Dr. Barkay, there's proof, there's evidence, and how can you dispute proof and evidence? And but it's one of those things. If you tell a lie often enough, anyone will believe it, and nothing's getting through. Either people aren't reporting it, or they're afraid, or why are people not talking about this?
Absolutely, but this is the way that totalitarian systems operate. They're always pushing their victims into historical invisibility. Now, you've got the left that did it with Stalin and Maoist genocides. We know about the Armenian denial, about the Armenian genocide. Noam Chomsky was trying to deny the Khmer Rouge genocide. Holocaust denial, Gulag denial. Now we've got the temple denial. Dwight, your thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to say that and this is one of the interesting things I have discovered about Christians. A lot of Christians in the United States don't seem to be interested in the Old Testament. The denial of the temple denies their religion too.
Right.
That's right.
That's
Because
right.
I mean, this is why the title of the book is profound, and why, as a cry about who's next.
Right.
You're next, and the temple denial is the denial of both of the other religions,
That's exactly
and we
right.
have, and I mean, my take on it is,
And represented by the Dome of the Rock being on top of the temple. Yeah.
But I think that we see it's the use of fear, the threats to kill, to wipe out, to destroy. And in our modern society, in the United States, we have 1% of the people involved in the protection of this country. In Israel, everybody
That's
is
right.
involved.
It's a matter of life and death.
It's a matter of life and death. And we are, in this country, which should be so attuned to what's going on there, we've just kind of flooded away because we don't want to deal with the danger of it all. And that's why this book is paramount.
One of the things
We only got a minute
I
left.
know,
Go ahead
one of the
briefly.
things you said, concessions breed violence. And you wrote that Noni Darwish said, the same liberalism that's making the West weak is there too. And that's something that we can't ignore in America, and that we can't separate Israel from here. The same things are happening in our
Before
own
we go,
backyard.
I'm sorry to treat such profound issues so quickly and briefly, but we got to go. But in the last perhaps minute, as a Christian on this odyssey, what are some of your departing words? I think maybe some Israelis were maybe even confused that you weren't Jewish.
They were, and they keep telling me I'm going to find out I am Jewish, and then everything will be okay. But I think that Christians have lost their grasp of the Bible, and this is a reason that they've lost interest in some of these issues, because the whole mentality is, well, what difference does it make? You know, we don't have to have a GPS to worship God. We can go out on the beach or go to the park. We don't need this GPS side, and I think that's an issue too. It's lack of faith.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate this segment. A lot of food for thought. We'll be back for our second segment of the Glazov Gang when we remember the Iron Lady. See you then.